Hello, spiritual warriors. Welcome to our spiritual warriorship class. And what do we do here? We discuss, we read and discuss books by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And we're currently in Spiritual Warrior 5. The conclusion, we concluded chapter 6, The Perfect Escape. But what I decided tonight, rather than start a new chapter, and I know you're all excited about that, but I've decided to do the questions and answers at the end of this chapter, The Perfect Escape, because all of these subject matter that we have are transcribed from tapes of classes that he gave. And at the end of each class, he would open for question and answers. So one time for a while I was reading them, and I haven't in a while, but I was led to do that tonight. And maybe I'll end earlier somehow. Throat sounds a little strange too. I hope it's coming across clear. Now, the perfect escape was having the classroom in this manner. I can't see you raise your hand if I ask a question. But of course, I'm always curious if you're willing to share something you may have gotten from a previous class, some statement, some paragraph that was read, or even a word sometimes can make a change in our lives if it catches our attention and we take it and apply it in our lives. This perfect escape, he covered so many things, but the last part, if you recall, was about Jade Bart, whose previous lifetime he was a deer, in his previous lifetime he was a king, who was ready on the brink of the perfect escape. In fact, he had given up everything and went to the forest to meditate, to be able to walk through the door, if you will. And yet, he got distracted by a baby deer, and it pulled his attention away. And he fell off a cliff and died, came back as a deer. But he came back with a memory of what happened. So he lived out his deer life, he died, and then he came back in a human form, if you recall. And in that human form, he still had a memory of what happened. And he made a decision. He wasn't going to get trapped again, so he went into deaf mode, as if he couldn't hear and couldn't speak, and just let people abuse him, whatever they wanted to do, but he was not going to get distracted from his goal. So, and he ended up preaching to a king and changed his life. So there was quite a bit in there, and I'm hoping those who were following us will have learned something, and I'm still asking if you so desire to share with me or the others in the chat room, if you're in the chat room, something you may have got. Because even Bhakti Tirtha Swami, he's listening and watching what's going on. I would like to know all these words, how are they helping you? So again, I welcome you. And we'll go to the first question. This is from the chapter, Perfect Escape. Why is it harder Hope my voice holds out, dear souls. Why is it harder to make a second comeback after a failure? For instance, if an alcoholic quits drinking for several years, but then succumbs again to the addiction, why is it harder for him or her to quit after once again falling back into the addiction and the habit? This is the answer. It is definitely a fact that our activities become habits and ultimately our culture. When we had a failure in our lives, it habituates us to more failure, just as sadachar, or good character, creates more good character. By having failures, we gradually begin to accept ourselves as failures and even feel comfortable in that mindset. We no longer have a desire to excel, nor do we feel excited about what we can experience. We instead put all our energy into the anxiety of failure. This complicates the situation for those who first give up drinking or smoking, but then they revert. For many people, it's like a death sentence, because they have basically accepted that they will fail again. Failure leads to more failure. And it makes the situation harder, but not impossible. Now, you see, he put it straight out in front of it. I like this with him. He'll put the picture right there till almost it starts hurting again, because most of us have had some of the experience that he's spelling out. But that's one thing with these spiritual warrior books, is he spells out everyday, I want to say, ordinary experiences that we have that may be an obstacle to our spiritual growth. He always then goes on to give us the technique, technology, understanding. So now he says, and he's talking about failure leads to more failure. It makes the situation harder, but not impossible. If they study their failures to understand how they ended up in that situation, they can make the necessary adjustments so that it will not happen again. And study takes time and patience and really caring for oneself. He says, by taking shelter of other people who can help them, they will also increase the probability of escape. As they humble themselves more, realizing how easy it is to fail, the failure can become a catalyst for success. That's a good one. Can become a catalyst for success. Sometimes the greatest achievers originally had terrible failure. But due to their intense determination to get out of that situation, the failure actually acted as a catalyst to help them succeed. Then, when they recognize a possible cause of failure, they will stay far away. The recovering alcoholic will not go anywhere near a place that has alcohol. In this way, a person becomes successful. So we have to stop and study wherever we are to see where we are and how we got there. And if he's saying, if you're not happy there, then you can begin a process of coming out. The next question. Sorry. Religious institutions help us to protect people from a good portion of the gross sinful activities. But we sometimes see that people might leave some institution to return to their previous environments. However, sometimes we might encourage an aspiring spiritualist to go back to an environment because they might need certain experiences. There's a school of thought that claims it might help a person to experience a little Maya. However, from your discussion, it sounds that such experiences could be quite dangerous and very risky. And I'm sure those of you who have been following us would agree with that statement. The answer, Bhakti-tirtha after the inmate, he uses this prison analogy, after the inmate has left the immediate vicinity of the prison, the guide might give the individual a temporary spot to rest. But he will also warn the prisoner against unsafe and risky areas. The guide expertly understands the situation and provides the proper protection. It does not mean that while escaping, the person has to keep running and running unnecessarily. The guide may allow the person to find a temporary place to recuperate, but still within boundaries. However, the person must maintain their vision and excitement about the goal, even though they need some time to rejuvenate. The guide gives shelter, but if the person starts to procrastinate, then the risk increases. For instance, in terms of our Gurukula children, if we too strictly force them to focus on the goal, it might have the opposite effect. If they feel imposed upon by so many rules and regulations and feel unable to express themselves, at some point they will do just the opposite. At the same time, if they are just whimsically exposed to sense gratification, they will automatically get addicted and settle into the bad habits, since they have been addicted in so many other lifetimes lifetime after lifetime we carry some of these habits. That's why some are very difficult to end. It is very difficult because if you give them too much freedom, they will then get habituated. And yet, on the other hand, if you impose the rules on them too strictly, they will feel choked and make an unhealthy escape. Now he tells us about the Amish and the Mormon. They have established certain principles that are powerful for any spiritual community. That is, any community that is trying to be in the world but not of it. Now, in terms of the Amish, approximately 90% of their children remain within the community, even though as they reach the age of 16, they have the choice to stay or leave. By that time, they have experienced the environment along with its social and economic security. They understand the technology, the theology, they understand the theology and now have the opportunity to make a decision. I remember when I was growing up, my mother used to use a term, but she was very strict. I think it goes something, you train the child in the way they should grow or be, something like that, and when they get older they will not stray from it, something like that. And the Amish, apparently that's their system. If you get it from birth, then you can decide if you want to continue with it or leave it. Now, although the Amish only educate their children to maybe the 8th grade level, they teach them so many technical skills that they can easily maintain themselves in a rural environment. When the child reaches 16 and takes the opportunity to experience more of the world, the community will not shun them for their behavior. It's really unconditional loving. If they decide to leave, their family will still welcome them back at any time that they decide to return. There was a story about that. I read it while I was in Pennsylvania. Very interesting. They followed, I don't know, 2 or 3 or more or less of the children who left the community. But I just don't remember the full story. But it was very interesting. These practices seem to help maintain a purity of the community. However, if they choose to remain within the community and formally join the church, they will be expected to follow the principles of the community and religion, because they have made their decision. For instance, if an adult seriously deviates from the principles, the family and community might shun them for a certain period of time. Now, during that time, the community will not accept service from this person, but they can offer service if he or she is in need. Now, this distinctly sends a message to the individual that they need to work on themselves to become a healthy member of the community. Once again, it also makes it clear to others that the person is in a diseased state. And in this way, the other people in the community will not also pick up the same disease. And that's happened to many of us. We've picked up the disease of others. We're pretty straightforward or got good training, teaching, even in community sometimes. And yet, what they say, one bad apple or something spoils the whole barrel. So interestingly, most of the Amish children return, not only because they have a choice, but also because they recognize something special about their own community. And just think, we've read about Jad Barat, who took him 3 lifetimes. 1 lifetime he was ready and he missed it. Came back, well, he was a deer, but he could remember, so he carried that through to his next birth. And there he began doing what he felt he had to do so that he wouldn't miss it again. We have to keep our eye on the goal. If the parents did not offer this freedom of choice, they might lose more of their children. Of course, some of the children get addicted to the many allurements and don't return, even though most do. Now, while the children go through this period of exposure to the so-called normal world, the parents and community are aware and can offer assistance at any time. They are ready to help based on the theology and the culture. And even if they get into different levels of deviation, but later want to come back, the parents and community will make all arrangements to reclaim them and help that person. That's unconditional love. There is power in that type of community. They understand that they cannot force a person to escape, or they cannot force a person to accept. So he's telling us that he says, I've been to some community in which the parents relentlessly force their children to act devotionally. But these children will surprise their parents one day when they become teenagers and run away from the process as quickly as possible. Some might even resent their upbringing. They will feel that they have been denied and abused due to the intense control and subjugation. Now, on the other hand, I have seen communities in which the children have so much freedom that they are already absorbed in sense gratification. At a very young age, and have accepted the mundane. He's saying he has the greatest respect for parents who are trying to raise children in spiritual environments. It is very difficult, but it is also the real test of how a philosophy is unfolding on a grand scale. The status of children will show the real success of a community. And the success will show in how the children can have guided and limited exposure that will not imprison them, but also simultaneously offer boundaries with loving guidance. However, even if the children have healthy guidance, most will probably reject it at a certain point, except in certain exceptional cases. But he tells us just to force children to follow strict rules and regulations will not work. It will cause so much curiosity that the child will hanker for freedom. But just to give freedom without the love, and that's what I say with the Amish, is strictly unconditional love. Without the love that comes from monitoring, will create a habitual sense gratifier. The person might have an unusual spiritual foundation, but will then accept the life of imprisonment as normal. Then, which route should a parent take? It's worse to limit and restrict the child or lean towards excessive freedom. Each parent will have to make this choice for themselves, and I would focus more on a side of leniency. However, if we are lenient with the children, we should be even stricter with ourselves. If the children see healthy parents and strong members of the community, their examples will act as powerful catalysts for the children. It will help them remain within certain boundaries and prevent them from straying too far into deviation. Most important, we should focus on our own spirituality so that we will please the Lord. Consequently, our own spiritual strength and credits will help complement whatever the child lacks. Whatever way parents choose to raise their children, there's always a risk. Therefore, we should give more attention to our own spiritual growth, because as we grow individually, we naturally elevate the environment. Now it's interesting in reading this answer through and the question that was asked. Bhakti Tirtha Swami had a way with his classes and darshans that he knew something may have been going on undercurrently, or even the person who asked the question may be having problem with their child or children. and still endeavoring for a perfect escape. So he delves into that deeper and deeper to help that individual and any other in this situation, parents who may be struggling with children. He just seemed to know how to go deep in particular areas. Now this is the last question, and I think I'm going to stop reading in a while. So anybody in the chat room? Carol, bless you for being there, Carol. Hang on, I'm almost done. I don't know how this voice is coming across, but I couldn't quit tonight. Now, the next question the person is saying, we know that we should not be dysfunctional, insensitive, or impersonal, but should try to properly maintain our material responsibilities. However, can't Maya trick us as we try to become more materially responsible? It seems that Maya can use this avenue to gradually allure us deeper and deeper into material entanglements. The answer. We can call this prayasha, or over-endeavoring for mundane things that are very difficult to attain, even within the devotional culture. This type of over-endeavoring can be detrimental to our spiritual growth if we act as the proprietor and controller. There he throws that. He's not throwing that in, he's placing that out there. If we act as the proprietor and the controller, and if we're studying these teachings, these philosophy, and reading Srila Prabhupada's book, we get it, or hear it, or read it, or talk about it, then who is the proprietor? Who is the controller? And if you have, that's the knowledge that we're getting. And if we have that and imbibe that and endeavor, then when situation and challenges come, you can get a sense of what's going on. He says here, for example, householders shouldn't deny their responsibility to their children, wife, and family by hiding behind renunciation. This is unhealthy because the householders should act as spiritual guides and take care of their families as a service to the Lord. Our renunciation means taking the nice devotional care of the family and the facilities that Krishna makes available for us. True renunciation has never meant that a person just avoids work and responsibilities because of the difficulties. Such immature renunciation happens out of laziness or due to lack of accountability. On the other hand, we don't want to involve ourselves so much in maintenance that we don't have time for quality sadhana. Therefore, we remind ourselves, the reason I hesitate, he has something here in Sanskrit, and when I see Sanskrit, I'm ready to go in another direction. But he says, he translates it here, we want to accept things favorable for devotional service. and reject anything that hinders our escape from this material world. When we make this evaluation, we need to honestly decide what is increasing our dedication to spiritual life and what is distracting us from our commitment. It's a good question to take some time with and evaluate and healthily, honestly decide what is increasing our dedication to spiritual life and what is increasing our dedication. What is distracting? What is increasing to spiritual life and what is distracting us from our commitments in spiritual life? Just sit with yourself and take time. Is it causing us to feel comfortable in the prison house? Or is it increasing our eagerness to attain ultimate freedom? And sometimes you have to really think, do you want ultimate freedom? Some folks may be having such a good time, they want freedom, and yet they step back because they don't know what's happening next or where it's going to take them if they decide they want to stop having fun. But it's important to question yourself and be honest with yourself. Yes?
Carol has a question. When do we try to use material solutions and when do we use spiritual solutions?
Material solution really doesn't solve the problem. Because as we just said a minute ago about priorityship and controlling, we don't own anything. We don't control anything. The Lord is the controller and the proprietor. He's within our hearts. He says in Bhagavad Gita, He's the intelligence within us. So there has to be balance. And if you bring the spiritual into the material, you will see how you bring a balance. And you can see where the spiritual is more powerful. He has, Bhakti Tirtha Swami has a whole, I was going to say book, but I know a whole chapter somewhere. He used to talk about it. The whole idea was solving material problems with spiritual solutions. So it's where you are honestly in your spiritual life. And do you see your faith increasing? Your understanding of the Lord and His position and your position in relationship to the Lord. That you're His eternal servant. And as you serve Him with devotion, He reciprocates with you. And as He reciprocates, that material problem you can see begins to dissipate and you realize where your energy's been going and being wasted. Is that helpful, Carol?
She made a comment, wow, is it increasing our comfort in prison house?
Say that again. Wow.
Is it increasing our comfort in prison house?
Is what increasing our comfort in the prison house? Your sense gratification and your material dependency, and as this person asked the question, the difference, that makes you think you're comfortable in the prison house. We're talking about escaping, and we want the perfect escape. so we don't get caught and come back again and have to do it again. Talking about a perfect escape. And that means getting perfect knowledge about who you are, who God is, your relationship with Him, and how to serve Him. Okay?
So thank you.
Okay, just a little bit more and we'll be done for tonight. The author tells us that the material world and its objects of enjoyment are designed to distract us. However, the scriptures explain how the same senses can be stimulated for sense gratification. The scripture explains how the same senses that can be stimulated for sense gratification can act as our source of liberation. The biggest problem is that the pseudo escape into sense gratification is always more accessible. Therefore, laziness and a cheating propensity will always lead one to accept the temporary escape. But if we do fall into past failures, we want to see them as catalysts to more cleverly plan a perfect escape. We not only want to come to the door, but we want to knock and then enter into the abode of eternal freedom. So again, I feel he's encouraging us, placing before us what our goal can be and is possible for us. So I'm going to end here tonight. It was just Carol on chat, and she stayed. Thank you, Carol, and you made a comment, asked a question. I hope you get something from these questions and answers from Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And next week, Bhakti Tirtha Swami willing and Krishna willing, we'll start a new chapter and see where it takes us. All right? Thank you, my dear, and all others who are out there, thank you for coming, and have a blessed week. Hare Krishna.